Welcome to Transformative Principal, where we interview real principals who are doing amazing things to help our students every single day. I'm your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. I am honored this week to interview William Parker, who's the principal at Skiatook High School in Oklahoma. This is a great conversation, and I am just every week I'm just amazed at how much I learn from these principals. You're going to really love this one. He deals with a very sensitive issue, which is student deaths, and tragically they've had 2 this year. And you're going to learn a lot about how they have dealt with that and what Will has done to make that a better situation. He's very impressive. Please excuse the audio quality on this. Because of technical difficulties, we just recorded our phone conversation, so it's not amazing quality, but I do kind of feel like an old-time radio host with a call-in show, so that was pretty cool for me. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this. Please also follow William on Twitter. His Twitter name is @WilliamDP. He says some great things and has some great conversations. I think you'll learn a lot from him.
Why don't we start, just tell a little bit about yourself and where you're at, and how long you've been there, a little bit of your history, that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, thanks Jethro, for letting me be on your podcast. And I've had a chance to listen, and you're doing some great stuff. My name is Will Parker. Online I go by my full name, William D. Parker, and I'm principal at Skiatook High School, which is a high school just north of Tulsa, Oklahoma. We are a 9 through 12 high school with 750 students. We're a small town atmosphere, but just close enough to Tulsa to be some people consider a bedroom community, but we're also a community of our own, and so it's a great place to be. We've got great teachers, great students, and this is my first year as site principal. I've been here the past 7 years as assistant principal, and when our principal retired, I moved into her position. So I'm living the dream, and my daughter's a freshman this year, so this is my first year to have one of my own kids as a high school student. So that's been a fun adventure too.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So how far are you away from Claremore?
Not too far. Claremore's about a 25-minute drive from here, maybe 30, depending on traffic.
That's where my wife is from. So.
Oh, she is.
Yeah, I spent a few nights there when I was dating her, and I lived in Texas, and she lived in Utah, and I went up there to meet her parents, and I think she might have come out once, or we've gone out there a couple times. So anyway, I know that area a little bit, and it's pretty nice out there.
Well, I've got good friends in Claremore.
That's good. So you were the assistant principal for 7 years at your school before you became the principal. Can you talk about some of the things that you really loved that the previous principal was doing that you wanted to continue, and some of the things that you were excited to change when you finally took control of the school? And not disrespectfully or anything, but
Sure.
We all lead differently, so it's okay to admit
Sure.
that.
Well, I served with a fabulous principal, Donna Brogan, who just retired after more than 20 years in education, and she was a fabulous leader. And some of the things that she taught me by working with her for so long was just how to work with teams, how to make shared decisions, and how to treat your staff with trust. Instead of making your decisions based on your weakest team members, to make your decisions based on your strongest team members. So that was a great motivation for me to learn to think that way, to make my decisions based on our superstars and how would they manage school if we were designing school the way that they would like it to be. And so sometimes leadership is often reactionary. We react to the fires that we need to put out. But when you think about creating a school based on what you want it to be, then you're a little more proactive in trying to create and design those structures ahead of time. So she did a lot of team building with our teachers, and also just creative ways to motivate kids to be successful. We create a lot of incentives for our students that if, whether it's test exemptions or her last year here, we started a motivation for kids that pass all of their state testing as seniors. In Oklahoma, we have 7 total state tests that kids take before they're out of high school, which is just enormous and burdensome.
Yeah.
But for the student that decides that they're going to pass every one of those, because they only have to pass 4 to get a diploma, we came up with something called a gold card standard, and we borrowed this from a neighboring district. But the gold card is for a senior who has taken all 7 and passed all 7 of those exams, even though they're only required to pass 4. And a gold card student gets privileges of off-campus lunches every day because we have a closed campus. So they have permission to show their card so they can leave daily for lunches as they choose. And then they also get a few other perks like some free tardies, and at graduation they wear special cords to signify that they met that standard. And so it's been a big motivation for a lot of our kids to not just pass the required tests, but to try to do well. And it's helped our school score as well. We're an A school.
Yeah.
We're an A school in our state, and part of that is because our kids are doing better on testing. And so that's something that we've continued since I've stepped in as well.
Mm-hmm. So our district does something called differential, and
I'm sorry,
I don't remember. Sorry about that. Our school district has differentiated diplomas where we offer advanced diplomas and advanced honors diplomas, and they have different criteria for achieving those, so that there's some incentive for students to prepare early, even in 9th grade, to start becoming ready for those more advanced and difficult skill sets.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's something we've been working on too, is trying to create advanced and honors tracks for our students so that they have special recognition when they graduate too.
Yeah. So, what's something that you were excited to change, that you feel is your baby that you've been able to help them?
This doesn't seem very exciting, but it's something that was a priority for me coming in, was to try to figure out how to better structure and organize roles and assignments for people throughout our building. And I think one of the challenges of school leadership is, you spend a lot of years teaching, and I spent 10 years in the classroom before I was in the office. And then suddenly in school leadership, you're also in a management role. And so I've had to learn some skills that I wasn't taught as an educator, even though I went through educational leadership for my master's. And part of that is just learning how to design and then communicate key responsibilities. And so part of our transition this year has just been sitting down with our office staff, our counseling department, the people that work in those office positions, and really hammering out specific and key responsibility areas. And I actually got the idea from a book that I was reading over the summer by Dave Ramsey called Entreleadership, and it's actually a book for people that are interested in entrepreneurial business ownership. And but he's just got some great management and leadership keys in there. And so one of the designs that he uses he calls them KRAs, which are key responsibility area assignments. And so I sat down with my office staff at the beginning of the year, and we listed out all of the key responsibility areas for each person, and then put those in writing so that throughout the year, as things came up, everyone knew to whom they should go. And there's a lot of hidden rules like that in schools, But we brought in over the summer. We replaced 12 teaching positions, and so it was a very busy summer for us in terms of recruiting and hiring and working with some new teachers and some veterans that we also recruited. And so I wanted to make sure that they knew, because sometimes it takes years for teachers to figure out, oh, that's the person who I can go to for that report or for that information. So I wanted to make sure that stuff was explained ahead of time and that those roles were defined as well. So it took time. It meant sitting down and having long conversations and then prioritizing and deciding if you found out two people were managing the same area, who was going to be the one that was ultimately responsible for it. And but in the end, it's been productive. It's not something that parents will ever see. It's not something that students even know it's going on, and most of our teachers don't really see how beneficial that is. But from a leader's perspective, it's helpful to kind of know ahead of time who has responsibility for those key areas throughout the school year, and then they're the ones that carry that weight, and they're the ones that you turn to when things are going right or when something needs to be corrected.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey and of Entreleadership, and I listen to the Entreleadership podcast faithfully. Have you listened to that podcast?
I've listened to it. In fact, I haven't listened to it in a while, but that was the first podcast I think that I started listening to that was leadership focused, and it turned me on to some others. Michael Hyatt is probably the most my biggest go-to in terms of leadership podcasts. They're just so practical, and so I really enjoyed listening to him.
Yeah, I think the stuff that Dave Ramsey has in that book, Entreleadership, is super valuable. That book was released when I was first appointed as an assistant principal at the school I'm at now, and I bought that for me and for my principal, and we both read it, and it's been a guiding force for how I lead the people that I work with, and the things that I try to implement. It's a great, even though it's quote unquote for entrepreneurs, it's still great it's good leadership, period. And I'm glad you're using that. I wonder if you'd be willing to share your KRAs for your office staff. I think people would find that very interesting and beneficial.
Sure. I've got a blog link on KRAs, and so if anyone wanted to visit my website, they can just go to williamdparker.com and search for KRAs in the search area, and they'll find it. Or I can send you the link later too if you want to share it.
I'll add that to the show notes also, for sure. Well, that's awesome. So one of the other things that I wanted to chat with you about was your school has experienced some tragedy this year, and that's a difficult thing for anyone to go through. But from reading your blog posts about it, it seems that you guys have taken a very healthy approach to that. Do you mind talking a little bit about that? And obviously, you want to be respectful of those who were involved in all that.
Yeah, this has been a difficult year for us in terms of student loss. We've had 2 student deaths this year, one at the very beginning of the year, or close to the start. We had a senior cheerleader that died in a car accident, and then more recently we had a sophomore girl who was actually murdered in a domestic dispute at her home. And so both of those were pretty terrible, again, horrifying and difficult, and all of those emotions that happen in a, not just in in any school community, but in one our size where everyone knows everyone, it's so personal. And so we learned a lot of lessons through this process, and it's something else I've written about this year too on my blog. But some of the lessons that we learned through trying to manage grief, probably the most important one is just communicating. We just went overboard in terms of making sure that parents knew what was going on, the teachers knew what was going on, pulling our faculty into an emergency faculty meeting the morning so that we could all be on the same page, emailing out to all of our parent email lists, steps that we were taking as a staff to respond to their kids and to make sure that they knew that we were going to have grief counselors on hand to be there for them. And so just communicating was huge, and then also letting our teachers know as we knew what was happening, and not just our teachers but our community. The second thing we did was just we tried to be as visible and present as possible. And so that meant for me contacting families directly to express grief on behalf of the school, and then assisting in whatever ways that we could with funeral arrangements. We didn't obviously arrange funerals, but in one instance we hosted the funeral because of the audience size that they were anticipating and the time that it took place. And so we tried to do our best in terms of being present and visible and helpful in those situations. And then number three, we really tried to maintain as much stability and routine as we could. I really think it's important when you're managing grief to get back to routine as quickly as possible, because it's healthy and the kids need it, and within that routine you still provide room for grief. So if a kid does need a break, or if a kid does need to see a counselor, or if a teacher needs to see a counselor, you've got that space provided, but otherwise you stay on track, because it's just so important to keep school managed that way so that kids get back to the routine and realize that life does continue even through tragedy. And then the fourth thing we did was we just tried to be open to creative and spontaneous responses from kids. So as they came to us with ideas, one day they wanted to wear a color and all take a big picture in the gym for the one student that had passed. So we allowed that. We just waited until the end of the period to pull everybody in, and it was just a kind of a spontaneous last-minute decision, but it was something that the kids felt was a good expression, and the family was really touched by it. And there were other expressions throughout those times that kids asked for, and if they were things that weren't disruptive or that seemed sensible, we tried to encourage it. And then we pulled together, not just ourselves, but we asked for help from outside our school. We have a great community of other counselors in other schools that came in, and area pastors who were close to our students and families the kids were comfortable talking to. And so that was very helpful. And then a couple of other things that we did during that time was we just really tried to show appreciation to the kids that are present. You can't forget to enjoy and celebrate what's happening even during tragedy. So I still made it a point to highlight student wins and to make sure kids that were doing great things were being acknowledged and identified, and I continued to brag on them through my parent emails so that we just weren't sitting in our grief without also remembering the great things that were happening around us. And then finally, the last thing we did was, and I'm still learning how to do this, but I just tried to make it a point to be a clear communicator to the media, because we had quite a bit of contact from media. In the first tragedy, it was almost all positive. In the second tragedy, the one that involved the domestic murder, I felt like the media was trying to sensationalize that more and wanted to be on our campus interviewing students, and I had to ask them not to be. But at the same time, I had to be the point person for that communication, and to make sure that I had statements written and to the local press as well as to some of the TV stations. So that's a part that you forget sometimes as a principal, that sometimes you have to be the point person, and you kind of have to guard your school from that media intrusion, because it does happen. And then sometimes the media is very, very cooperative and understanding during those times, especially the ones that I know personally. Yeah. And then I guess the only other thing I would add to that those experiences this year too is just as a leader, allowing yourself to grieve,
Mm-hmm.
and just realizing it's okay, because privately you've got to acknowledge your own struggles, but then come to grips with the things that you remember are important about life, because when you lose students, you always come back to remembering what's most important.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so sorry you guys went through that. One of the challenges that we face when we're dealing with a circumstance like that is that there are so many different things that we could do. How did you know what was the right, or maybe not the right, but the best thing for you to do? How did you make those decisions of when to allow spontaneity and creativity from students, and how did you know when to get back on track? Was there somebody that you talked to that you went to for advice, or was that you just doing the best you could under a lot of stress?
I think for us it came back to what I talked about when we started this conversation, which was just remembering how important being a part of a good team is. And so as a in the background from everything that we were doing visibly, there were lots of conversations going on between me and people on my leadership team or leader teachers, phone calls and conversations about what can we do, or this has been asked, and is this a good direction to go? And so there was a lot of chats and a lot of conversations happening in the background where we were discussing those things. And then sometimes I just had to trust people. I had one teacher that told me afterwards that the day after our senior student's death, that when the class came in that shared class with her, they were just quiet and depressed, and no one was even speaking, and which is really hard to do instruction in those kinds of settings. And so she finally just said, hey, let's just move to another location for a little bit. So they went out and sat in the commons and just chatted and talked. And then they came back to the room again. And this time one of the students said, can we just get a Sharpie and write on her desk? And she told me later, I'm sorry I didn't get permission for destroying school property, but I told them, go for it. And so there's a desk in that room where there's messages to her.
So that's a pretty powerful story. I've got goosebumps, and I'm feeling emotional hearing about that. But the fact that the teacher felt comfortable enough to say, yes, that's okay, shows that you have established a trust with the teachers that they can make those kinds of decisions when they need to, and that's pretty amazing. Can you talk a little bit about how you have established that collaborative culture where you give them authority to make decisions and make them feel like they can do that without the fear of a reprimand or punishment from you?
Sure. And I think part of that comes back to long-term relationships. First of all, I've been a part of, as an assistant and now as site principal, I've at least 2/3 of my staff are people that I've been a part of hiring. And so, so we communicate a lot about vision in those conversations when we're doing hirings, about the priorities that we have of hiring teachers who are both great instructors and also compassionate. And so that's kind of that's been a running theme here for a long time at our school, that my former principal established, and something that obviously when she recruited me, that was a priority that she wanted in my leadership. And so as it's not perfect, and we're just as imperfect as any other staff. But again, I think part of that building that trust just comes back to, let me just give you some practical steps. Part of building that trust is making sure that when you're communicating to your teachers that you treat them with the kind of dignity with which you want to be treated. And so, for instance, I'm not a big proponent of what I call shotgun messages, where, let's say, for instance, you've got one or two teachers doing something wrong. Instead of blasting the entire staff, you talk to those one or two teachers. And so when we have faculty meetings, I don't spend my time harping on the things that are going wrong in our school. I try to address the directions that we're going, remind them of things that we need to be doing, and if there's something that needs to be corrected that is chronic throughout our building, we address it. But I just try to remember what it felt like to be a teacher and how and the kind of respect and dignity that I appreciated if I was given it by my administrators. And so, so a lot of that's just built over time. And I think another part of too, and this is something my former principal is really good at, and I've tried to continue, is staying connected to people personally, knowing what's going on in their lives, knowing what's going on with their families, and making sure that you're connected to them, not just at a professional level, but also at a level where they know you care about them as a person, so that when you are having that tough conversation about a professional issue or something that may not be going right in a classroom, they still know you care about them. And so even with situations as a school leader where I've had to coach people into other choices, or when people have decided to move on and to do other things, we've tried to keep that as cordial and meaningful as possible because relationships matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they sure do. You're right. It sounds like you've got a lot of awesome things going on at your school, and I know you started this out saying that it's not too exciting what you've been doing, but I know that building those kinds of relationships and having that kind of feeling among your faculty is an exciting thing, because I know that it doesn't happen at every school. So I know that you're doing some great stuff. I end each of my interviews with two questions, which if you've listened, you know what they are. The first one is, what is something that someone can do starting today to become a transformative principal like you?
I think the way that I would answer that is for them to, and this is a bit philosophical, I think it's important for a leader to stop and remind themselves why they do what they do, to understand the meaning behind their leadership. And so for me, that means that I remind myself, I try to on a daily basis remind myself that I am both helping make this environment a better place for kids to be in school, and I'm also trying to find the things that are broken so that I can help repair them. And so that's kind of deep, but I think understanding the meaning of your leadership helps you stay focused. And so that's an action step I think that we can take every day. Just stop and remind yourself, why am I really here? It's not always about reports. It's not always about meetings. It's about creating a better environment for kids, and then helping to repair the parts that are broken.
Right. That is pretty deep and full of meaning, but it's also very simple too, and it helps you make decisions later that align with the why that you're there, and we can't forget that. I think that's great advice, William. Thank you for that. The last question is, what is something in your office that is meaningful or inspiring to you that helps remind you of the reason why you're doing all this?
Well, this is a bit self-centered, but it is something that I'm proud of. But in 2012, I was recognized as the Oklahoma Assistant Principal of the Year, and
awesome.
And so I was given some wonderful things like a medal and a plaque, and then I was given an opportunity to travel to D.C. and meet principals from all around the country. And so I have a number of memorabilia from that trip that I keep on my shelf, and I look at it quite often, because it was in education, all of us sacrifice every day, and it's not very often that we get recognized for those things. And I know that in my position, I was being recognized really as a representative for the other people that did the job that I do as an assistant principal. But it was just one of those moments where I got to actually enjoy a brief time of applause and celebration for the hard work that we do every day. And so for me, those are awards are small accolades, but sometimes it's good to glance over every once in a while and remind yourself that, yeah, what I'm doing does matter, and sometimes people even notice it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Well, William, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. I've learned a lot from you, and I know the people that are going to hear this will learn a lot from you as well. Do you mind sharing how people can get in touch with you and if they want more information about how to be awesome like you?
Sure. And Jethro, thanks so much for calling and talking to me, because I just really enjoy connecting with school leaders. And so the best way people can find me is online. I started a blog over a year ago, and it's exclusively information that I write for school leaders, because I just found that there's a lot of education blogs for teachers, but there's not always conversations that are happening just principal to principal. So my website is my name, WilliamDParker.com, and I call my blog Principal Matters. And that's the best place to locate with me. If you're a Twitter user, my handle is WilliamDP, and I would love to connect with people. And if someone wants to give me a shout out, I'd love to follow you on Twitter or connect with you in whatever ways you connect socially.
Great. I also noticed that you publish your posts on connectedprinciples.com as well.
Yeah, I'm an associate with Connected Principles, and George Kuros runs a fabulous site over there. And so it's been so much fun to take my posts and place them on Connected Principles too, because he has such a vast audience and a global audience. And so it's just been a lot of fun to connect with principals, not just here in my own state, but really around the world, because Connected Principles is so well read.
Yeah, it is, and that's how I found you originally. How did you get connected with that, William?
Well, George Kuros is the moderator of that site, and he's just a fabulous writer and speaker, and through correspondence through Twitter and eventually through email, we were able to connect, and he has lots of contributing writers, and so I had asked if at some point I could be a contributing writer, and after he had reviewed my stuff for a while, he gave me permission, and so I have a WordPress login that I can use where I can contribute my posts there too now.
So he is in Canada. You're in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You have you ever met him face to face?
Never have. It's just all been connected through how you and I are connecting. Digitally.
I want to go into that a little bit because it's pretty powerful how we can meet up with amazing leaders and principals and other people through the power of social media and be able to have that connection and eventually become part of something bigger like Connected Principles, which is a fabulous website, blog, whatever you want to call it. And I learned so much from it. And I read almost every single article that goes on there because it helps me be a better leader. And it's just fascinating that, people are contributing who have never met each other but have just seen that they like what the other is saying, and it's pretty powerful.
It's amazing, and it's been so eye-opening for me just to see just what's going on in the world of school leadership, because now that we've got so many ways to connect socially, I don't feel quite as alone. Leaders no longer have to be on an island. There are hundreds and thousands of others just like you, and that's a great way to find them, is online.
Yes, it sure is. Well, once again, William, thank you so much. I'll let you know when this is published, and I'll send out quotes on Twitter throughout the week that it goes up so that people can be reminded of it. Again, thank you so much. This has been really awesome for me. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks, Jethro.
Again, just a great interview with Will Parker. He is amazing. Please be sure to share this episode and this podcast with your friends. Let them know about it. Tell them what you're learning. I know I'm learning a ton, and I hope you are too. If you have a principal you'd like to recommend, I got a great recommendation this week. Please send it to me at Jethro Jones on Twitter or jethrojones@gmail.com. I'd love to hear some of the people you think I should be interviewing.